Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken.
It's good to have you back. I don't know. Anything going on in the world you want to talk about?
Nah, it's all pretty quiet, isn't it? Nothing happening.
Nothing to worry about. It's just a lovely other day in the drone world.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and read this statement. Do you know Ryan Lauterette? Here he is. He was on the show just a few weeks back talking about this very topic. Here he is introducing himself, and then I'll read a statement from him.
So first, let me say, for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Ryan Lauterette, and I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Great Lakes Drone Company in Michigan. Race Day Quads sued the FAA over remote ID, but in order to do that, they first have to come up with the protocols as to what's going to be broadcast over remote ID. They haven't done that, right, at all, and that has to be incorporated by the manufacturers in September of this year. So we're only a couple months away, and we still don't have the protocols.
So that was just a couple weeks ago. And let me go ahead and read the statement that he gave after the decision was handed down, where Race Day Quads lost. And then, Bruce, you can tell me if you agree or if you have any additional input, which I know you will. All right. Ryan says, the recent decision in federal court that denied Race Day Quad's lawsuit regarding remote ID was largely disappointing. I think we can all agree with that. While RDQ does have an opportunity to appeal the decision, the likelihood of such is close to nil. The decision by the panel of 3 federal judges isn't likely to be overturned, and was the recognition by the plaintiff that they had given their all in the arguments. What this court loss does do is make a dangerous new world for the drone operators who comply with remote ID. Giving anti-drone Karens the location of pilots during operations will cause disruptions and harassment during flights. We are likely to see an increase in the destruction of drones and equipment, along with thefts, as a result of the general public being granted pinpoint locations of drone operators in flight. The one positive out of this decision is the denial of the argument that low-altitude airspace should not fall under FAA jurisdiction. Had the court ruled in favor of RDQ's suggestion of some airspace as private property, it would have opened the floodgates to state and local ordinances, creating complex patchwork quilt, making it next to impossible for drone operators to know where they could or could not fly. And what remains to be seen now is whether or not the drone community will comply. Do you think the drone community will comply?
Well, the feedback I've been getting is that there's going to be a very low level of compliance. People just don't, they're not interested. And they know that enforcement is so weak that they'll get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. There's no enforcement.
Yeah.
Other
the
than
risky element there is that when there's no enforcement, the authorities usually pick someone and make a scapegoat or an example of them to try and have a chilling effect on everyone else. And that means if you're that poor person, well, you get the book thrown at you for no real reason sometimes.
So this hard date of the 16th of September, do we have to worry about it this year?
I don't think so, because one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to push that date out because nobody can ship a compliant drone, or they're going to say, we won't be enforcing this until a later date. The rule comes into effect, but we will not be enforcing it until whatever. So either way, it means it gives a bit more breathing space.
Do you think it'll just keep getting pushed out? Because the reality of the situation...
There's a lot of commercial pressure on the FAA to clear the space and make sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to do. So they can't push it out forever, but they may just because they're so far behind the calendar at this stage, they've got to do something.
Will our older drones be grandfathered in? I mean, we'll have to add them.
You'll be able to fit a remote ID module to them in 2023. I think that's what happens. But all new drones manufactured as of, not necessarily sold as of the 16th of September, but manufactured after that date. So it becomes hard to enforce anyway, because you don't know how many drones and things are in the pipeline. You go into a shop on the 17th, and all the drones there are likely to have been made quite a bit earlier than the 16th, so they can still be sold without remote IDing.
Right. Will there be standardization of this module? Will there be different sizes for different size drones?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah, they've left the door open there as long as it complies with the requirements, and that you can. I think you can self-certify, but there has to be, a statement of certification, and as long as it transmits all the data in the formats which are yet to be really announced, then you'll be able to throw that on your model. But that's a whole year out. We don't have to worry too much about that. It's only store-bought, brand new drones that we'll have to be concerned about.
so in your opinion,
Unless you're part 107 and you make your own drones, and if you make a drone after the 16th of next month, you're going to have to fit your self-standard remote ID to it.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, the 107 people need to worry about this a little bit more. But
How much does that cost too? You got to think.
what's that, Tater?
I'm wondering how much it's going to cost if you have to fit a unit to your drone.
Well, the broadcast remote ones, the little modules, they won't be very expensive because just about the same price as a radio control receiver, I think. Pretty cheap. Probably you've got to look at about $50, $60 to $100 maximum. But it's the standard remote ID thing that's the problem. If you want to build, if you're a Part 107 operator, you want to build a freestyle drone after the 16th of next month, you're going to have to fit a system that also allows your transmitter to talk to the drone to tell it where you're standing, because that's one of the parts of standard remote ID, and also a system that will not allow the drone to take off unless the remote ID has checked itself and said that it's working. So it's quite a complex system.
Oh, wow.
How do we instill real world practicality into this governmental stuff? Because clearly the people that are coming up with this stuff have no idea how it's supposed, because in their mind, how is it supposed to work ideally to the powers that be?
Well, the only thing you can do is lock up the lobbyists. That's the only way you'll stop this from happening. It's money is talking. And it got so bad. I watched an FAA stream. It was the day before yesterday. Enjoy your drone, or have fun with your drone. And it was speaking to people. What do you do when you buy your drone? They walked you through it. And I was dismayed because the people who were presenting this were not recreational drone flyers. They were members of the FAA and the commercial operators and things, telling people how to have fun with their recreational drone. And they said, when you buy it, you've then got to register. They didn't mention that if it's sub 250, you do not have to register. It was really, really biased, and it was taken from a commercial perspective. And this is the whole thing that worries me. The commercial side of drones is controlling the recreational side way too much. We are the majority. More drone flights every day are done by recreational users than by commercial users, but the commercial users have all the say, and that's not right.
Yeah, and that whole sub 250 myth is being perpetuated, where people think that sub 250 drone is an outlaw drone. You can fly on the White House lawn. You can do whatever you want with it. As the law stands right now, if it's under 250 grams in the United States, then you're just saving $5 from registration because you're not a commercial
Exactly.
pilot.
One of the problems is that we don't have consistent drone laws between countries, because if you go to the UK, if you've got a sub 250 gram drone, you can pretty much fly it everywhere except for flight exclusion zones. You can fly it over police stations and all sorts of things. You see these auditors on YouTube in the UK going along and flying their drones everywhere and trying to make people angry because they go to a company and say, I'm going to fly my drone over your building. And the company manager says, no, you can't. But they can, because they don't own the airspace. And under 250 grams, you can fly over people. You can do all sorts of things. But that doesn't apply in other countries. So people quite rightly get a bit confused.
That is true. And, people tend to follow FAA's innovations, let's call them, in other countries. Like, for example, your CAA there takes cues from the FAA,
Yeah, there is a bit of backwards and forwards between regulators, because, for example, the US, or the FAA, is now looking at shielded operations, which is something that was invented in New Zealand, where flying below the tree line, you're not a threat to manned aviation, so you should get extra privileges and rights when you're doing that.
Yeah.
And I think the FAA is looking into that. But we've had that here for 6-7 years, I think.
Yeah, I'm all about that. Shielded operations, that's just common sense. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, if you have a question, I know Tater does. If you have a question, let us know in the chat. Yes, Tater.
Well, is this rule also going to apply to like RC models, fixed wing aircraft, or is it strictly okay?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's no distinction made at all between rotary wing and fixed wing things. So, as of the 16th of next month, manufacturers making bind and fly and ready to fly models will not be able to sell them without having the standard remote ID fitted, because they are a drone.
Man.
Yeah, there is so much confusion, and that's why, these these people are flying their sub 250 drones over police stations in the UK because even the police there don't know all the rules. And
everyone's confused, which is crazy because we have the same drones, the same air, the same risks and everything. So if all these regulators have done the risk assessment, they'd all have the same set of rules, but they haven't. They're just pulling stuff out of their backside, so to speak. Well, we think this is dangerous, we think that's dangerous, but they're not actually identifying, quantifying the risks so they'd have a harmonious set of rules.
Is it because they're ignoring the people in our community that can give them that information, that real world information? Because
this is all driven by commercial interests. If you look at the makeup of the ARCs that are there to the FAA consults with, I think the hobby has got is it 2 or 3? I think 3 people supposedly representing the hobby, but 2 of them are commercial anyway. We've got Vic Moss, nice guy, but he is Vic Moss photography, aerial photography. He's not solely recreational. We've got Kenji, and he, I think, is also has a commercial entity because he's tied up with Vic in some way. And the interesting thing here is if we want to stop this remote ID thing going through, we can, because Kenji holds a patent for remote ID technology. Now, Kenji said he's all for the hobbyist and so forth. So Kenji now, with his patent, can do one of 2 things. He can say, well, I'm actually telling porkies and I'm not for the hobby. I'm going to not enforce my patent, or I'm going to license it perhaps to the FAA and make a lot of money out of it. Or he can say, I hold the patent. You cannot implement broadcast remote ID because you don't have a license from me. What do you think he'll do?
Oh, that's an impossible position to be in.
Yeah,
but he put himself in that position. He was on the ARC discussing remote ID, and so he became privy to the fact that, well, this technology is probably going to come, rushed out and filed a patent. And he says he's working for the hobbyist. I think he should say, I refuse to license this to the FAA. We should all throw a whole lot of money in a pot so that we can take the FAA to court if they go ahead and use it, because it would be infringing his patent. And a patent is only a right to sue, and to sue you've got to have the money. I think the community would throw as much money as necessary into the pot to sue the FAA if they breached his patent.
Yeah, but then wouldn't somebody else just develop something else and patent
but a
it?
patent covers the theory, the whole concept of broadcasting all that information. You can't get around it.
So it's the idea that he's patented.
Yeah. That's it.
Really?
So he holds all the cards, and I've said I don't believe that Kenji and Vic are truly in there for the hobbyist, even though they are the hobbyist representatives. And now's the time to hold Kenji's feet to the fire and say, if you really are here for the hobbyist, then don't let the FAA introduce the remote ID. Hold your patent to them and say, you need a license, I'm not giving you one.
All right, devil's advocate.
Hit us, old devil.
If Nikola Tesla didn't invent radio, by the way, Nikola Tesla did invent radio, speaking of patents, okay? Marconi was a thief. Marconi stole many of Tesla's patents to invent radio. So in that vein, wouldn't somebody else just come up with a different, because does a patent cover a theory like that?
Yeah. The patent says this covers the broadcast of information about the drone from the drone using radio frequency. And you can't get around it. That's how broadcast remote ID works. That's the only way it works. So there's no way around that patent. And yeah, that's a trump card.
So if Alexander Graham Bell didn't want anybody to have a phone, he could just patent the phone and then we'd be all screwed? Yep. Really? I think somebody else would have invented a phone. I don't know. I mean, I like the idea of that, but Kenji's in an impossible position to have to make a decision.
It's not really impossible. You make your choice. You either say, yes, I am for the hobbyist and I'll use my patent for good, or you say, yeah, I was actually telling pork pies when I said I was for the hobbyist and I'm going to cash out on this.
Right.
Man.
Yes, Tater, you look like you're in deep thought.
Or is he going to be the good guy riding in on the white horse?
It's a position he put himself in, though.
Man.
So, what's our community like? What's drone hobby like in 10 years, Bruce? How does this all shake out?
Well, look, there's this promise. I mean, remember the opening comments of that judge? Drones are coming, and a lot of them. Run to the nearest window, everybody. Look out. Do you see any drones? I bet you don't. It's all hype and hysteria produced by the commercial drone, parties who want to be able to monetize this airspace. So I think it's all pretty much going to fall flat on its face. Because another thing I was thinking about today, you've got all these heavy delivery drones, 50 pounds plus delivery drones flying over people's houses and roads and things. You've got these autonomous air taxis with people in them flying over buildings and cities and roads and so forth, and they're all controlled by GPS. GPS is the way they navigate. They know where they are. There's a coronal mass ejection, solar flare from the sun, and the GPS system, everyone loses a lock. What happens next?
True. And what you said about the commercial drone industry really does affect hobbyists. The only reason hobbyists now can have unsustained flight over people is because some delivery drone company had to fly over people to deliver their stuff to someone. It's like BV loss. The hobby's been doing BV loss for over 10 years. And there's never been one death, one injury, or one piece of property damage as a result of that. So the hobby knows what it's doing with BV loss. Yet we've got the commercial drone industry dictating to us how BV loss will be done. And they've never done it. Most of them have never done it, but they're going to tell us how to do it. Will the CAA in New Zealand, will they kind of take charge and say, what you're doing is kind of dumb. Maybe we'll do our own thing. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, all the regulators want to lead the world in regulation, which is another reason why they're all different. They also, our regulations are best. We're leading the world. And so to their credit, the civil aviation in New Zealand, when the government suggested that drones should be registered, they pushed back and said, no, there's no point. There's no purpose. It doesn't increase safety. All it does is impose a financial burden on people, and we don't see any reason to have it. And the government said, oh, my goodness, well, okay, then we'll tell someone else to do it. So they passed the burden of regulation from CAA to our Ministry of Transport. And the Ministry of Transport is now going to set the rules, and they will do whatever they're told, so they will introduce registration here. I find that atrocious because I don't transport anything with my drone. What has the Ministry of Transport got to do with my drone? Yeah,
the problem is trying to do blanket legislation for so many permutations of different drones and RC thing, fixed wing, like different. There's so many different things. You can't.
Yeah, but we don't need all these regulations. You only need 2 regulations. Do not endanger people. Do not endanger property. Everything else is advisory.
Yeah. And the one reason I have hope for the future, I somewhere in the back of my mind, I don't see remote ID happening. I just don't. There's not a real reason. I just feel it in my heart. I feel it's going to fall flat in its face. And the reason why I say that is because I remember back in the olden times, you remember the olden times, back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. Shut up, Tater. You're a youngin'. But you used to have. Do you remember CB radio?
Yeah.
In the United States, you used to have a license, and FM broadcasters like myself, we used to have from the FCC a license to broadcast on an FM station. And what happened over time is people just didn't do it. They just didn't do it. People were hired too quickly. The paperwork didn't go through. It was too expensive or something. Then finally the FCC just said, meh. And now you don't have to do it anymore. Anybody can be on the radio or talk on the CB. But it's stuff like that.
There was no safety imperative with CB radio. No one was getting hurt if someone broadcast on a CB radio. And that's one of the things. And the real reason we have remote ID is because they want to monetize the airspace. Remember that networked remote ID that was originally suggested? You would have to pay before you could arm your drone. You'd have to have the thing be connected and pay. That is the end goal. That's the end game. And the FAA said, we listened to all the feedback and we made these changes. The only feedback they listened to were their technology partners who said, we can't provide you with enough coverage for you to implement the system. So if you look carefully at the FAA's response, they say, we will not be implementing network remote ID at this time. They said at this time. As soon as the technology is available, they'll say, right, everyone's going network.
But again, back to enforcement.
Yeah.
The FAA, the CAA, they're not enforcement agencies. They leave that up to. Am I right? I mean, there's no.
The thing though with remote ID is that they're passing that burden on to police. Police will have their little apps on their phones, and if they see a drone and it doesn't have remote ID, they can then, and of course, they will then farm that out as like a concession. If the police want to make money, they just track down the people with that remote ID and give them citations, and they keep the money.
Yeah, and police don't want to deal with that. They have so much other things to deal with. They're dealing with mental health and everything else that police are asked to do.
Oh, come on. I watch TV. All the American police are just sitting on the side of the road to collect money from motorists. They just have these, things they stop them. And I see on YouTube that people get pulled over, and if they got cash in the car, get seized as all that sort of stuff. It's a terrible situation.
Yeah, which is part of the reason why my drone patrol cop car is so hilarious, because there is no drone enforcement. That's why it's funny to me. But I don't know. I just don't. Should do, in your opinion, because there's a lot of people, I get emails all the time. There's too much stuff I got to worry. I'm out. They're either leaving the hobby or it's a barrier to get into it because they're worried about all this stuff.
Barrier to entry is too high.
Yeah. Bruce, your opinion
with all
on
this,
that?
all the penalties and risks associated, I think a lot of parents will say, no, you can't fly drones. Go back to dealing drugs on the footpath, on the sidewalk. You know, it's much safer to do that than it is to have a drone. But the real problem is that we're regulating recreational drones as if they were commercial. There needs to be a much bigger divide between the hobby and commercial operators. Sure, make commercial operators fit remote ID, make them do anything that you need to, because the risk profile of their craft is totally different to the risk profile of a Mavic or something like that. You know, a 55-pound delivery drone, if it falls on your head, it's going to kill you real dead. If a Mavic falls on your head, you might get a scratch and a sore head, but it's not going to kill you. The risk is great, massively different. So they need to, all these things that they're introducing, I can see a place for them in the commercial drone operation, but certainly not in recreational use.
Yeah.
Right, but they're trying to legislate common sense.
Yeah.
Because
I don't even think they're doing that. I think they're trying to make their own job easier by not bothering to draw a distinction between things like model aircraft with fixed wings and, that you're not going to be flying in downtown, New York, and a drone and a commercial operator. They're all different. They need to be treated differently, but the regulators just said too hard, we'll treat them all the same.
That's too hard. You're right. That's lazy.
It is
exactly.
lazy.
That is lazy.
And despite the fact they've made it so easy for themselves, they're still going to miss their September 16th deadline.
Big Water UAV Solutions with a $10 super chat. Thank you very much. He says, non-compliance and nullification is the answer. Remote ID puts the F in the FAA.
Martin Luther King rocks. Remember what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So just your final thought on all of this, because this is the hot button issue right now. What? Just again, in the near future, we don't have to worry about September 16th, 2022.
Only if you're buying brand new stuff off the shelf. That's the only, and that's the retailer's problem. They can't sell them. So they can't sell them if they don't have standard remote ID. So as users, unless you're a Part 107 operator, as I say, and you want to build a new drone, then you're in real trouble, because unless they push out the enforcement or the actual implementation deadline, you are required by the rule to fit standard remote ID, a certified standard remote ID system, to your new built drone. And that's not going to be possible.
Okay. And then there's another date. Is it September 16th, 2023?
Yeah, that's when it comes in for everybody. If you've got existing drones, you have to fit a module on them, or radio control models, put a module on them and fly that way. The interesting thing is, I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to lose their shirts in the commercial drone industry. It's not going to be what they're claiming to be. We won't have these air mobility, autonomous air taxis, electric multi-rotor air taxis. It's all going to fall apart when the reality of the situation finally comes home. It's like Bitcoin. It's like the dot-com boom. There's all this speculative investment, and then suddenly, the cold, harsh light of reality dawns, and all the money disappears, and people go, "Oh, what were we doing?" In which case, a lot of this stuff will be unwound, and we'll get back to some sensibility.
I hope you're right. And you usually are, sir.
And by the way, what percentage of the super chats do I get?
Oh, you get 100%. I'll send that to you. Do you have you got the pay thing? You got the
I read on the internet that you have to pay to be on these podcasts and on the streams now. People are paying big money to go on these streams because it increases their profile. So how much do I owe you, Ken?
Oh no, gratis, no problem. Just
we'll call it contra deal, eh? We'll do a contra.
This one's on me.
Yeah. Little pro bono work there.
Yeah. So one more thing. You got a little bit more time, Bruce?
Yeah, sure.
Here's something wacky. Apparently, there was a NPRM here in the United States that recently closed about, and this is insane to me, that apparently drones might have right-of-way over hot air balloons. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I think I saw something about that. Yeah.
Oh,
and then
my!
The hot balloon people are outraged because they can't move.
Yeah, they're just big lumbering elephants of hot air. Where they're evasive maneuvers. You know what? There's a drone. Let's get out of there. You can't steer those things. That's, I'm always in favor of the drones, but the hot air balloon guys, they're a wonderful group. I know many of them, and there's no way that works.
That would have been proposed by the commercial drone people because they don't want to have to give way to anyone.
You're right. You can read into it just like that, because what if here comes Amazon with my tube socks, and there's a big old lumbering, stupid ass hot air balloon in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
The only reason they're doing that, not because they expect the hot air balloon to get out of the way, but in the event of an inevitable crash, then they won't be liable. Which is, again, what I say.
Yeah.
All these drone deliveries will be possible after all the lawyers die.
Yeah, and there is one solution that the US will never embrace, but it's done by Altitude Angel in the UK. They've developed a system which would not require remote ID at all, and hobbyists could fly anywhere they wanted, and it automatically routes the commercial drone traffic around the hobbyists. So the hobbyists basically have right of way. It's a fantastic system. It's being trialled in the UK at the moment in what they call a drone corridor, and if only the USA and other countries would adopt it, we wouldn't have to have all this crap.
Yeah, well, one day it'll be... the skies will be filled and there'll be some sort of highway in the sky that's legit and able to happen. But unfortunately, we're not there technology-wise.
Oh, drones are coming, and lots of them.
Lots of them.